The following presentation was recorded during the Beyond Study Information Evening on March 23rd of 2023. This recording is shared with permission from the study authors and all meeting participants. For copies of the available documentation, please visit KBG Foundation at www.kbgfoundation.com or Cerebro Network at www.cerebronetwork.com.
Just a reminder, this meeting will be recorded and it will be disseminated at a later date. So, everybody mind your P's and Q's, if you would, please. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the presenters tonight. Dr. Haley Crawford is an associate professor at the University of Warwick Medical School, where she leads the Neurodevelopmental Conditions Research Group. Her research focuses on characterizing behavioral and mental health outcomes in individuals with neurodevelopmental disorders associated with intellectual disability. Her work to date has primarily focused on understanding autism, anxiety, ADHD, and behaviors that challenge in children and adults with rare genetic syndromes through describing behavioral profiles, developmental trajectories, risk markers, and mechanistic underpinnings. Haley received an Incubator Award from Mental Health Research for building research in underserved areas. Haley is a specialist advisor to the Fragile X Society, a co-director of the Cerebro Network for Neurodevelopmental Disorders, and assistant deputy director of the Midlands Mental Health and Neurosciences PhD program for healthcare professionals. Dr. Joanna Moss is a senior lecturer at the University of Surrey. Her research is concerned with understanding the prevalence, profile, and social cognitive mechanisms associated with the development of autism and related characteristics in individuals with genetic syndromes. Dr. Caitlin Murray is a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Surrey, working on the BEOND study as part of the Cerebro Network. As part of this work, she also focuses on autism characteristics and autism diagnosis in individuals with genetic syndromes. She completed her PhD at the University of Warwick, researching the family context and measurement of mental health and well-being of children and young people with intellectual disabilities. Dr. Karen Lowe is a consultant clinical geneticist in the UK and is a member of the KBG Foundation Scientific Advisory Board. Her interest in KBG syndrome started back in 2016, when she published the largest cohort of patients with the condition at the time, and has since co-authored several further scientific articles on KBG syndrome. She continues to see patients with KBG syndrome in the UK and has an ongoing clinic and research interest in this condition. It's my pleasure to turn the time over now to you.
Thanks so much. So I believe I'm going to kick off with a bit of an introduction as to the Cerebro Network, who we are, what we do, and then I'll pass on to the others who will be able to give you more information about a particular study, the BEOND study. So I'm just going to try share my screen. Hopefully someone will tell me that that has worked.
It's just black at the moment, Haley.
Is it? Okay, maybe give it a second. It's just loaded up on my screen. Anything yet?
It's still blank for me.
No, okay. Caitlin, do you maybe want to try? Because I think you've got the latest version of everything, if it's not going to work on my end. That looks much better. Thank you. Okay, fab. So yeah, I'm just going to give an overview, first of all, of the Cerebro Network for Neurodevelopmental Disorders. So we can go on to the next slide. So we're based in the UK, and I'm just going to start by sharing our aim, our central aim with you, which stems from the fact that children with neurodevelopmental conditions, children and adults with neurodevelopmental conditions, experience poorer developmental health and well-being outcomes compared to those without neurodevelopmental conditions. So our work to date has shown that these inequalities are heightened in children with the most complex clinical presentations, and that's particularly in those with intellectual disability that's associated with rare genetic syndromes or autism. So we are a pioneering collaborative research network. We're funded by Cerebra, which is a UK children's charity, and we do work solely to reverse that position, essentially, and to level the playing field for people with rare and complex needs. So our aim is to really improve the evidence, the scientific evidence that underpins better assessment and interventions for clinicians, and therefore leads to improved outcomes for these children and their families. Thanks. You move on. Thank you. So we've been privileged to do research as a team for over 10 years now, and each of us leads a line of research in the Cerebra network. So we take an equal role of each leading within the Cerebra network. So there's 4 of us. Jo is obviously here today, and myself, and then Caroline and Jane as well. So Caroline Richards is based at University of Birmingham and Jane Waite at Aston University, and the 4 of us lead the Cerebra network. And it's our long-standing collaborative relationship that means that the network research is integrated from the ground up. And it also enables the network between us to train a higher number of students than any individual approach could offer. And due to our sharing of resources and expertise across 4 leading universities in the UK, our research can reach wider to include students from a variety of backgrounds. So today we're supervising PhD students, postdocs, placement students, undergraduate students, master's students, clinical psychology trainees, and medical trainees who often go on to be general practitioners or family doctors. So we're training a wide range of people from a wide range of backgrounds to really upskill people in the area of rare genetic syndromes associated with intellectual disability. Okay, move on, please. Thank you. So there's only a few of us here today, but I just wanted to show you this slide essentially to show you that we don't conduct this with just 3 of us. It's a huge amount of work, and we actually have more people working in the network than even is on this slide. But yeah, the top line represents most of our staff. The bottom 2 lines represent our doctoral students. But each of these staff members and doctoral students conduct research that meets the aim of the Cerebra network, which is to improve the evidence that underpins better assessment and intervention for people with rare genetic syndromes. Thanks. So each of the 4 institutions, as I mentioned, leads on extensive work into autism, sleep, and mental health with a shared focus on behaviour. We know from our previous research these are key priorities for families, and the areas where there's the highest need for improved assessment and intervention as well. And it's the integrated nature of the Cerebra network that means that our combined knowledge and expertise and resources across 4 universities affords us the opportunity to adopt a more holistic approach to better understand the challenges that are faced by individuals with intellectual disability and their families. And this is particularly important because we know that behavioural and mental health characteristics occur in combination rather than on their own. So, for example, someone who is experiencing anxiety may also experience sleep disturbance, which can impact on behaviour. So considering all aspects of a child's presentation is crucial to improving support, and that's what we aim to do within the network. So across the network, we address a number of key challenges, and together these improve the evidence that underpins better assessment and intervention. So specifically, inadequate identification of autism, sleep problems, and mental health conditions presents a barrier to clinical diagnosis and access to relevant services. So if people aren't diagnosed or identified as having anxiety, for example, or autism, then they don't receive the support because it's not been identified. So we're developing tools to improve identification to overcome this barrier. We're also developing models that indicate precise mechanisms that give rise to clinical presentations of autism, sleep disorder, and mental health conditions. And this leads us to the third key challenge, which is to develop and pilot interventions. So, I mean, it's a lot of work, but we really enjoy it. So we're really committed to improving long-term outcomes for people with intellectual disability and rare and complex neurodevelopmental conditions. And we do this via translation of our research into resources that are useful, we hope, to families and as well as the professionals that work with the families. So I'll now move on to just share some information about the resources that we provide, essentially to highlight, I think, really the impact that our research has on families. We don't just do this research in order to publish papers in academic journals that no one can access. We do it to actually provide resources that are useful for parents and professionals. So from working with families over many years now, we know that how we share our research findings is really important to ensure that the people who really need the information get it. And also they get it when they need it, rather than 10 years down the line when it's taken that long to translate research into policy. It's something we want to actually share more immediately than that. So we've developed strategies that remove unnecessary delays and communicate findings in an accessible format. So this includes our Cerebra guides. So some of these have been commended or highly commended by the British Medical Association, which is a big deal in the UK. And we've also provided infographics and training videos. And we also have a strong presence at syndrome support group conferences, where we'll deliver presentations to families on our latest research. We'll share all of the resources we have and just get to chat to families. And that's really what inspires our research, is those conversations where we find out really what people need, and then we're able to share with them what we have found out and what might be beneficial and helpful for them. We've also produced manuals of our assessments that we've developed. So one of the things we've done in the Cerebra network is develop a number of questionnaire measures that can be used by parents or carers to complete about their child or the person they care for, around their behaviour and mood. And these are really unique because they're designed specifically for people with intellectual disability. And we've made all of these questionnaires completely freely available to use and for clinicians to use via our Find website. So that's findresources.co.uk. And this is a website for parents and professionals providing the latest information and research findings on rare and complex needs. So that the impact of Find is really what we're so proud of, because it's, we're able to share that with families and professionals. And it demonstrates the value of our translational work, not only to families and the intellectual disability community, but also to the professionals that are working with these individuals in order to better support them via their professions. So we're also really excited to have just launched, just on the next slide please, Caitlin, an online teacher training resource. So this is to support the complex needs of children with genetic syndromes within educational practice. And again, this is freely available online, so parents may wish to share it with their child's school. And this resource has been developed to raise awareness and understanding of the complex needs of children with genetic syndromes, and to support educational practitioners and teachers who are working with these children. So during within this online resource, there's opportunities to hear from a senior educational psychologist and teachers, as well as parents and carers of children with genetic syndromes. And the resource has been developed in line with relevant research, with specific examples that are discussed, and it's all applied to relevant sections using supporting evidence. So it characterises our aim really. It's we improve the evidence that underpins better assessment, and then translate that into resources like this that, yeah, we span the professions, healthcare and now education. So I'm just going to end with a sort of motivational quote, really, that what we aim to do is work together with families and clinicians, educators and our collaborators in the network to ensure that there is a pipeline for future researchers and clinicians who together are transforming outcomes for families of children with neurodevelopmental conditions and supporting families to live their best lives. So I'm going to hand over so that you can hear more information about one of our flagship studies that you can help us conduct by taking part in. And yeah, you'll get to hear about that now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to hopefully share my slides. Can you see at the moment? Okay, can you still see main slides? Yeah, okay. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Hayley, for introducing the network. As Hayley mentioned, we have a number of projects that we're working on across the network, and each of the network leads, so myself, Hayley, Jane, and Caroline, leads a kind of theme of research into these different areas of autism, sleep, mental health, and behaviour. The BEOND study is an example of a study that sort of cuts across the network themes, and as Hayley says, is one of our flagship studies, and is really focused around improving identification, improving our understanding of underlying processes and mechanisms that drive the development of particular strengths and differences across genetic syndromes. And the BEOND study is really about trying to better understand behavioural and emotional differences in children and adults with a range of neurodevelopmental disorders and conditions, and to do that in a very fine-grained and detailed way. So I'm just gonna, I've got a video here that I want to play. Hopefully this will work, which will just give you a little bit more information about the study before I talk a bit more in a bit more detail. Can everybody see that?
One of the biggest questions that we still don't fully know the answer to is how and why we change in the way that we think, feel, and behave over our lifetimes. We've been partnering with charities and families of children and adults with rare genetic syndromes over the last 20 years to work towards answering these questions. We know from our previous work that there are a number of key areas that we need to understand better to give every child and adult the best chance of a happy and healthy life. We know these factors are particularly important for children and adults with rare genetic syndromes. BEOND is a pioneering international multi-site online survey that will follow children and adults over their lifetimes, focusing on those key areas. Through this, we will raise awareness and understanding of rare genetic syndromes, which is at the heart of what we do at the Cerebra Network. Beyond stereotypes, beyond stigma, beyond labels. To take part in BEOND, please follow the link in the video caption.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of what BEOND is about and the reasons why we are carrying out this work. The BEOND study is an expansion of a longitudinal cross-syndrome survey that we've been conducting over a number of years, initially as part of the Cerebra Centre, which was led by Professor Chris Oliver, and we're now kind of taking that forward within the Cerebra Network. So that longitudinal survey started in 2004, and we've been collecting data on a number of different genetic syndrome groups over that period of time. And thanks to the input from over 2,000 families, we now have, we think that this is now, to our understanding, that the world's largest database on psychological characteristics and behavioural characteristics of children and adults with rare genetic syndromes. And so carrying out this work across a broad range of groups in this way over time enables us to answer really important questions. And it's really only through work like this that we can answer those on a broad and a large scale. So these are some examples of some of the academic papers that we've worked on as a result of this cross-syndrome approach and our previous surveying. And so the development and expansion of BEOND means that we can continue to do this work, that we can work with new groups that we haven't worked with before, and that we can also work with a younger cohort of children who may have been diagnosed since we first started this study back in 2004. So BEOND is a really large-scale study, and we're really excited about extending this and working with people with KBG and families. This slide just shows some of the family support groups of rare syndromes that we've been fortunate enough to partner with in research and in relation to the BEOND study. And we really value the partnership with family support groups. We couldn't do the work that we do without input from those groups, and with their help to share information with families and promote the work that we're doing, so that we can reach as many people as possible. And I want to just share a little bit of an example, really, in terms of what we can learn from this type of research. So I know that this table looks very busy. I'll just explain very briefly what you're seeing here. So this is results from one of our previous surveys with data collected in around 2004. Across a range of different syndrome groups. So here we've got different groups: Angelman syndrome, Cree-de-Shao, Cornelia-de Lange, Fragile X, Prader-Willi syndrome, Lowe syndrome, and Smith-Magenis syndrome, evaluating strengths and differences within each of these groups on a range of different areas. So autistic characteristics, mood, hyperactivity, and behaviors that challenge. Where you see a plus in this table, it means we're seeing more of that behavior. When we see a minus in the table, it means we're seeing less of that particular characteristic. And the circles indicate that we're sort of somewhere in the middle. And what I really want to just draw your attention to is the profile of characteristics that we're able to understand through this type of in-depth surveying. So we can see really specific profiles of strengths and differences within individual groups, so that we can identify where the areas of priority are. So, for example, in Angelman syndrome, we can see that hyperactivity, overactivity, and impulsivity are particularly high in this particular group, and that might be where we would then kind of focus our work and our research and our support for families. In Fragile X syndrome, we see a very different profile. Here it seems to be much more focused around social communication difficulties, repetitive behaviour. That seems to be where we might focus our future research and support for families. So what we gain from this type of survey is very in-depth, detailed information about individual syndrome groups and identification of those unique patterns of strengths and differences that we see within the individual groups. It's also helpful for us sort of position the groups alongside other syndromes, it helps us to understand better where those strengths and differences are, and how they present in a kind of more broader framework of the wider population of people with rare genetic syndromes. I just want to turn quickly to another example of an area where we've really been able to advance our understanding of behaviours that challenge, in particular, genetic syndrome groups through this type of surveying work that we've been doing. And this is work that will continue in BEOND. So here, again, I know that it's a kind of tricky graph to look at, but really, I just want to explain very briefly what it shows. So we have proportion of people in different genetic syndrome groups in terms of the proportion of people who show here self-injurious behavior on the left and physical aggression on the right. And the reason why I wanted to show you this is because actually we can get some really important information from these types, asking these sorts of questions. We can get an understanding, for example, that in Cornelia de Lange syndrome, self-injurious behavior is highly prevalent, and is significantly more likely to occur in this particular group relative to other genetic syndrome groups. In Angelman syndrome, we don't see quite as much in this in terms of self-injurious behavior, but what we are seeing is physical aggression in this group. And so that distinction is really important, because we might approach those different challenges in very different ways. We also know that the underlying mechanisms that kind of drive these behaviours and these different behaviours that challenge within these groups is also very different. In Cornelia de Lange syndrome, we know that the self-injury tends to be associated with pain and discomfort. In Angelman syndrome, physical aggression tends to be associated with this kind of increased motivation for social interaction that we see in that particular group. And so this kind of detailed level of evaluation helps us not only to understand where are the priorities for these groups, where are the key challenges, but also to help us understand, okay, what are the things that are driving those challenges? What are the underlying areas of research that we need to do to better understand those differences? So I'm going to hand over to Caitlin, who's going to talk a bit more about how you can take part in BEOND. I will stop sharing and hand over now.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll just pull up my screen now and talk about the sort of practicalities of where to find out more, and then also how to take part. So if my screen is loading now. So my name is Caitlin. I'm a research fellow at the University of Surrey, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the practicalities before handing over to Dr. Karen Lowe, who will tell you a bit more about why you should take part and sort of the impact and benefit to individual families, and then also to the KBG community in a wider sense. So the first way that you can take part is just follow the online links that will take you straight to the survey. So you can take part online at redcap.link/BEOND, and the QR code there as well will take you straight to the survey. You can also find out more information before you decide whether you'd like to take part on either of these websites. So on the KBG Foundation, there's a link to information on BEOND right on that front page there. And you can also go to our network website at cerebronetwork/BEOND-KBG, and that will show the video that Jo showed earlier. You can find out more information. There's an information pack there which will give further detail about the study and what it involves. And then you can also, at the bottom of that page, either take part online by following this link, or you can take part by post. So if you would prefer to take part using pen and paper with a physical copy, you can request a postal pack there and we'll send one out to you. And we do cover all postage. It's a little bit more complicated internationally. So if you're requesting a postal pack internationally, we will send one out to you. but we will have to reimburse your postage rather than directly pay for it to start with. So just to give a heads up on that, that is something that we offer if that would be more useful to you. So the request is there, or you can take part online as well. And a little bit about what to expect when you're taking part in BEOND. So first of all, who we're asking to take part is people who are the parent or guardian or carer of someone with KBG syndrome, where the person that you care for is at least 1 year old. So when you follow the link to the survey, those are the questions that you'll be asked, just to confirm that you are the parent or caregiver of somebody who is at least 1 year old and has KBG syndrome in this instance. So that will go there. And just as a kind of overview of what actually taking part involves. So the questionnaires are designed for you as a parent or carer to complete. All of the questionnaires are in English, and we're not able to provide translated versions at this time, although the survey is open internationally. And the survey will take approximately 60 minutes or an hour to complete, but you don't have to complete it in one sitting. So you can return to the questions. You don't have to sit there and do the survey all at once. And there's a range of questions included in here. So there'll be questions covering sort of the child or person you care for's diagnosis, their health, their behaviour, their mood and sleep. And then also questions about yourself and your own mental health and well-being, and then some questions about your family situation as well. So what this actually would look like as you were taking part. So the first thing that you would get to is much more detailed information about the study and about how we treat your data and things like that you can read through. And there's a consent form as well for you to complete as the parent or guardian and the person taking part in the survey. But we're also very aware that there's a lot of information about the person that you care for that you're reporting on. And so we think it's really important to consider how that person would feel about the survey as well. So we have which is demonstrated on the right here, a symbol information sheet to help you explain the study to the person that you care for. And if your child is unable to understand the study information, then as a parent or carer, you could provide that consent for the both of you. But if they are able to understand it and you talk through the study with them, then there'll be some additional questions to make sure that they're happy for you to share their information with us. And then you'll also have some questions about the Cerebra Network participant database, information about that, and the consent form as well. And the reason I'm highlighting those kind of initial steps is because that will be, once you've completed all of those initial steps, you will then start the survey with those different measures on the different topics it covers. But once you've completed those first 4 steps, you'll then be able to return to the survey. So the response will be saved and you can return to the survey as many times as you want to complete the survey following that. So just as a quick summary, that's the link to the survey. If you want a postal pack, you can request that on our website. You can find out more either on our website or on kbgfoundation.com, which you can also find the information on BEOND. And just also to say to please get in touch with any questions. So this will also be circulated as well, so you can find out any information. And now I'll hand over to Dr. Karen Lowe to talk a little bit about sort of why you might want to take part specifically.
Great. Let me just try and share my screen. And if you can just tell me, is it in presenter mode, Caitlin? Yep. Okay, lovely. Very nice to be here. Thank you for having me. And as you can see, I've got this lovely colourful slide, and it isn't all covered in BEOND motifs, etc., or Cerebra Network motifs. And I think the reason I'm saying that to you all is because I just thought it probably is worth pointing out that actually I'm not funded by the Cerebra Network, and actually I'm here completely voluntarily of my own accord on a Thursday evening at almost 9 o'clock at night. And the reason I'm here voluntarily is because I know a lot of KBG families and actually feel really passionately that this is a really important study to take place for those families. And this study taking place for KBG particularly has come about after my reaching out to the Cerebra Network to see whether we could do some more research for KBG families in this area. So why do I feel so strongly about it? Well, it's because a lot of families, a lot of parents come to me when they talk to me about their children, a bit like this. I've had quite a few really quite distressed conversations with some parents who've been just in a really tricky situation at some point with their children over various different behavior problems, and really struggling to know what to do about it. And even though I've seen lots of families with KBG syndrome and I've published lots of papers, we don't really have very good answers to those questions. And I find that really frustrating because I want to be able to help my patients better, and I want to be able to give families really good advice. And the sort of behavior problems that families are talking to me about are things like anxiety, but really specific things around anxiety. There's a family I remember who his child was really anxious if it was windy outside, and they would take about an hour to get out the front door if it was a really windy day. Sensory issues, activity levels, so really significant problems with hyperactivity to the point that children can't sleep at night. Social communication differences, including autistic traits and autism. Lots and lots of sleep problems, varying from too much sleep to really not sleeping at all and waking up a lot at night. Lots of unusual quirky behavior, like I mentioned, the child who couldn't get out the door when it was windy. There's another family whose child isn't American, but sometimes adopts an American accent, has never been to America, and lots of problems around concentration and focus. And I'm sure that you parents in the audience tonight can fill in your own in that last block as well, because I'm sure I haven't covered all of them. So why would you be part of this research? Well, I mean, it's the biggest concern that's raised in my clinical experience when looking after KBG families. It's always the question that people want to talk about. And I think Annette and Paige from the foundation would echo this as well, that it's the question that comes up with the foundation the most. We know that in the studies that have been written now about KBG syndrome, they do report behavior problems, but not in very much detail. And really, we need to understand the issues properly before we can give tailored KBG specific advice. And that's what families need. But without really understanding what's going on well, we can't do that. So how can participating in this study really help? Well, in terms of the wider KBG community, by clearly documenting behavior and mental health issues, this means that we can really understand the problem so we can use the right strategies. Health and education professionals will have evidence of the problems, which will help them support individuals better. And this is a really important point, actually, particularly in, for example, in the UK, where funding for things is so much harder to get in all areas. If there's documented research demonstrating a need or a challenge or a difference, it's much more likely to be successful if you're applying for that support or funding. And I know this from clinical experience in KBG syndrome, where there wasn't any research at all about learning difficulties in terms of the specific learning difficulties. And then one paper has been done by my Dutch collaborator, Charlotte Ukkelen's group, which documents a few of the learning difficulties specifically associated with KBG syndrome. And it was a result of this paper that I was able to help support a couple of families actually get additional funding for their children in terms of their education. So just having that documented evidence sometimes really helps support individuals' needs better. And once we've got better documentation of what's going on in the syndrome, well, then we can conduct specific treatment research based on these findings to try and find the right treatments. And this can be I don't just mean medications, although medications might be relevant for some of the problems, but also what strategies work best for different problems. And then it's not just about how this can help the wider community, it's also about how this can help your child and your family. And this is something I've just been blown away by about this BEOND study, is that at the end of participating in the study, you as a family will get a really quite comprehensive feedback report. Now, this is still in draft form, so it might not look exactly like this by the time you get it back. And if you have specific feedback, I'm sure that the BEOND study team would love to hear it. But this is just some of the, I'm not going to show you all of it because it was quite long, but this is just some of the pages from it. And you can see there's a really long contents list there, and that's because you're going to get reports on all the different measures that you've completed. And then you've got a results page here. The first one is about the Wessex questionnaire, which is about how your child can look after themselves in terms of scores for daily living. Now, just off the top of my head, I could see that being helpful in a disability living allowance application or similar, whichever country you come from. Challenging behavior questionnaire, which will again be very helpful in support. Social communication questionnaire, a questionnaire about clinical anxiety. So all of these reports are giving you the results of your child's analysis and also showing where your child is in comparison to the larger group in some of them. Talks about the sleep habits questionnaire, seizure severity scale, mood questionnaire, repetitive behaviors questionnaire, sensory experiences, which I think would be really great in terms of education settings as well and supporting children's specific needs, activity questionnaire, which will be amazing with all of the hyperactivity problems that I know are seen in some of these children. Oh, that's the end of my slide. So essentially, I think you get something really amazing at the end of the study, which you can then use as evidence when you're talking to health and education professionals to really help them support your child as a specific individual. And that's something that I think is really, really worth doing, and you could pay really good money for and not be able to get something like that. I think it's a fantastic study and wholeheartedly supported as a clinician. That's me done.
I guess I'll take over. Does somebody else?
I was going to say thank you very much to Karen, and it just to say also in terms of the report, as Karen says, is it in draft form, so we're still kind of welcoming any feedback that you may have you know, around that and what you may want to see within those reports. So please do feel that you could contact us with additional information.
Fantastic. I suppose a massive thank you is in order. First and foremost, Dr. Lowe, thank you so much for setting this up for us, getting us in the BEOND study and providing this opportunity to share this information to help families better understand what's involved in the research, what they get from the research, and the long-term goals of the research. I really, really appreciate this. And I need to reiterate how wonderful it has been to work with the doctors at the BEOND study. And this Cerebra network. It's literally been a complete and utter joy. At no point in time have I ever sworn at anybody under my breath. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now we're going to open the floor up to any questions that anyone might have. You can either put them in chat, or you could, do we have the ability to raise hands turned on? Anybody know?
It looks like we should do, but there you go. Yes, Karen is.
Any questions? Paige asks, do people need to upload or share records like their genetic tests to prove they have KBG syndrome?
So we have included an option for people to be able to upload their records. or letter that they have from their clinician. It's an optional part of the survey, but actually it's very helpful for us in terms of being able to kind of obtain that really clear information, genetic information about the type of difference that people have. But we have we've set up a very secure infrastructure using a system called REDCap, which is used across hospitals, research environments and universities in the UK. And it's very, very secure in terms of storing that very sensitive information. So yes, there is an option for that to be uploaded. And, you know, if you do have that, it's really helpful for us to see.
Okay, another question from Joanna. Do you have any contacts with research organizations in the US that you are collaborating with or will be collaborating with? I mean, we have a couple, but I know the international collaboration is really kind of tricky because there are different standards and there are different regulations. Our patient registry that should be launching in the near future may be able to assist with some of that because they do support international regulations, but we don't know quite yet to what extent we might have researchers outside the US interested in working. Yeah, so
we also have some really nice examples of collaborations with universities in the US around, so they're relatively specific collaborations, either about, you know, to do with research around a particular genetic syndrome or a particular area. So for example, we've got a really strong collaborative relationship with the Neurodevelopmental Disorders Lab at the University of South Carolina, where we conduct joint research and we share data as well now, which is quite a new, exciting development because that's been something that's been almost impossible to do up until now. But we share data, so it just maximizes our opportunity to increase our sample size, which means we can reach more people and our results are more meaningful. So we do have that collaboration with a particular genetic syndrome, Fragile X syndrome. We're always on the lookout for more collaborations that, you know, are specific to other groups. Or we have collaborations around a particular topic. So we know, for example, that pain, unidentified pain, often underlies particular behaviours, and it can almost be like a form of communication that someone is experiencing pain. And so we have some really nice collaborators that we work with and do some really great work together from the University of Minnesota. So yeah, we do have those collaborations in place. And at the moment, they're relatively specific to groups or topics. But yeah, as I say, we're always on the lookout to expand that. And we've got a model now, I think, that works quite well to do that international collaboration.
A question from Caitlin. Can we use some of these reports as evidence in another country, especially the educational pieces? Will they be accepted in, let's say, Canada?
So the report is yours to use as you would like. They are not clinical reports, they're research reports. So, you know, they do provide a lot of information, and the measures that we use are valid and have been developed for use within these populations and should be, would be recognised in any kind of, in most clinical settings. And you know, what we found in the past is that families have found it useful. It's something physical that they can take to school and say, you know, put that on the table. It makes a bit of a noise. You know, read through it. There's information in here that can be useful. So, as I say, yours to use however you would like. And we hope that they would be kind of useful for in any context as well.
I have to smile at the idea of dropping a report on a table as you enter the room at an IEP meeting. I love that impact. We have a hand raised. Yes, my dear.
Hello, sorry, I'm not very good at typing. I couldn't find how to type. My question is, I'm in the UK, and thanks to KBG Foundation, it's been a lifeline. However, being in the UK, after Isabel was diagnosed in 2004, we were kind of left, that's it. And I know you say about healthcare professionals, but my GPs go on Google to find out about KBG. So my question is, this is great for me. This is like a web of information. However, my question is, so you know about yourselves, but like, is there any way that I mean, because I end up telling the GPs what KBG syndrome is and it's limited. So with this information, are they able to obtain it? Because that, and obviously education, because she has syndrome, she doesn't fit any box. So I guess my two questions are, great is I found this information, but how can I forward what I've heard today? How can I use this before I do the survey? Is this available for the healthcare professional and the educational teams to also get hold of this information that I've learned tonight? I hope that's okay.
So Hayley, do you want to take the kind of healthcare, and I can take the kind of education aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank you for your question and comment. It's frustrating, but this is not the first time we've heard that a GP doesn't know what a particular syndrome is. It's actually it's that exact issue that kind of motivated the start of my research into this, when we were at a Cornelia de Lange syndrome conference, and a different parent said exactly the same thing. My GP doesn't even know what Cornelia de Lange syndrome is. And so since I started at the medical school at Warwick, I've been delivering training for medical students so that when they are GPs, they at least know what it is. But we also work with the Medics for Rare Diseases charity, and they're producing some GP training right now that has you know, a lot of information for healthcare professionals, particularly GPs, around rare diseases. So obviously KBG is just one of many, but there are a lot of issues that cut across different groups, and the primary thing is about getting that diagnosis and that support in place. The other thing is that the resources we produce, so the Find website, for example, it is for parents, but it's also for healthcare professionals. So again, KBG syndrome isn't one of the specific syndromes listed, but again, there are a number of genetic syndromes where the issues cut across behavior, mental health, sleep, autism. And so that information you might find is relevant to take to your GP without you having to sort of explain it, or you could give that website essentially the link to your GP. But we're also in the process of trying to obtain funding ourselves to produce some GP training. That sort of thing takes a really long time to actually get the funding, then develop the resource and then share it. And at the moment we've done some sort of pilot work and produce some videos for healthcare professionals, but it's primarily to support healthcare professionals to provide better support in those appointments and things like that. So we're sort of getting there, but we have a long way to go, I think.
Can I just add in as well, Martine, just because you were saying about your GP, there is it's a different organisation, but I'm hoping that most people will have received a copy of the unique organisation leaflet on KBG syndrome, which was written by myself. So that's a really straightforward, easy to read leaflet about KBG syndrome that you could give to your GP. It's free to download off the internet. I can probably put a link in the chat in a second, and just describes the syndrome in very, I think it's like a one-page, double-sided document, tells them what screening needs to be done. I actually need to update it because we slightly need to change the recommendations in it, but it's still good to go for the GPs at the moment, and they can just download it for free. And there's loads of other syndrome leaflets available on their organisation as well, but the KBG one's been written by me.
Thank you. Would that also work for the Evelina and the London hospitals? Because it doesn't just end with GP, she's under quite a lot.
No, you could give the same leaflet to any healthcare professional as a starting point, absolutely. Yeah, and to teachers, to be honest, because it gives a really good summary of the syndrome as just as a starting point. I'll put a link in the chat for everybody.
Thank you.
And I'll just sort of add to that. So I suppose the other thing to say is, although KBG is not yet featured on the Find Resources website, the more work that we can do to kind of better understand the profile of strengths and differences in KBG, the more we can work towards being able to add that information to Find. So this is a starting point for us, but our hope is that we will be able to provide that information for other groups, specifically on Find in the future. In relation to the education aspect, so the teacher training resource that we've just launched, there is a link in the chat and I can paste it again. The way that we've developed that resource is to cover kind of very broad aspects of how a teacher or how someone in education might approach supporting anyone with a rare genetic syndrome in education. So what we've done in that is not focus on specific conditions, but to give a kind of broad approach that these are the things that you need to try and understand in order to better support that person. So that means you need to go and research the syndrome. Here are the places that you can do that. You need to think about physical health, along sleep, so trying to give very broad kind of guidance on how to understand the needs of someone with a genetic syndrome, and kind of just raise awareness of the kind of importance of knowing about the syndrome alongside the kind of individual needs as well. So we're kind of working on those things. There are, to some extent we're trying to do some of that already, but there is always more to do in terms of raising awareness. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. My son is stomping around and I didn't think you always wanted to hear that. But Raja, welcome to the family. She writes that their 7-year-old daughter was diagnosed with KBG syndrome 2 days ago. If you haven't joined our family group yet, if you go to Facebook and search for KBG Foundation, there's a link that's pinned to go to our family group. And in the family group, we have about 600 patients and about 2,000 individuals that support those 600 people, including the 600 people. And we're happy that you were able to get on this call to find that information to get here. So thank you. Sarah asks, how long does it take to analyze the survey results and provide feedback report to the family?
So we're sort of still working on that timeline at the moment. We're fairly early on in the study, but we would hope to be in a position where we can start analysing the data around sort of 6 months after we've closed the survey. So it takes us quite a long time to clean the data, to check everything, to kind of do any follow-up calls that we need to, just to make sure we've got the information that we need, and then to produce the individual reports. So we would like that to be much quicker, but there is a lot of work to do in order to be able to get to that point. But we are, very much committed to making sure that we do that in as timely a way as possible.
Thank you. And for those of you that might not have seen it, Dr. Lowe did link out to the unique flyer that she created. Excuse me, pardon me. Paige asks, when do you want to have all the questionnaires submitted and what's the closing date?
So we don't, at the moment, we are leaving the survey open for quite a long period of time. But we anticipate that when we launch the survey with particular groups, that we're likely to get the most responses within the first sort of month or so. So we're kind of working on that sort of time frame. But there will be, you know, we want to make sure there is also opportunity for as many people as possible. So we will keep the survey open for a really good length of time. And hopefully people will kind of participate within the next month or so.
I think it's also, I know that lots of people who have KBG then also have friends who have KBG because of the incredibly strong KBG community through the KBG Foundation. So I think word of mouth would be really great here as well, as it is for those people who have heard the talks tonight and are keen to take part in the study to tell others as well about it, because I just think it's this phenomenal opportunity that we've got right now to do this work, and we want to obviously make the most we can. And I know from Annette's from what Annette tells me, that we have well over 300 families now in the world, so we should be able to get lots and lots of data from this, which will just be so helpful.
Absolutely. We oh my goodness, I forgot what I was going to say. My apologies. We have we're about ready to close. Does anybody have any last items they would like to stress, or one last question? Okay. We will be sharing the link to the study multiple times over the next little while. We will and thank everybody for being here, and thank you very much for your time. And your time is very valuable, and we acknowledge being able to access it for as long as we have. It's very appreciated. If anybody has any additional questions. Oh, Sarah has raised her hand. Sarah, please.
Sorry, just to say thank you, because I've got a son who's been diagnosed for 2 years. So we're still learning a lot about how to explain how Robert is. We find him very unique, but it's nice to be able to support him. And like others have said, I'm informing the GP and the teachers. Thankfully, we're in mainstream school, so we're reaching out to people who don't perhaps work in regular disability facilities and things like that, if that's the best way to put it. So this is very exciting times. Thank you.
Haley or Caitlin,
Thanks very
Joe,
much.
anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that's come, everyone that's shown interest in the BEOND study and their support moving forward. So we really look forward to continuing that work and finding out more about KBG syndrome and you know, doing that work with this group. We're really excited about this new relationship we have with the KBG syndrome group. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, and we hope to see everybody in the family group.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.